All right, we got a few more people coming in. We're waiting for Michael, and then we'll get started. But I know he had another meeting going, so you know what? Let's get started with there he is. Let's get started with introductions, and then we'll jump right into it once Michael gets all situated. So Marco, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, James, and everybody for attending another Saturday legislative roundtable with all of us, and appreciate everybody's commitment. I know it's Saturday, but appreciate everybody's commitment for doing that. I'm Marco Montalblanco, the president of the Washington State Fraternal Order of Police, and it's an honor to be here.
Jack, once you're next on my screen, why don't you go ahead?
Jack Symington, Washington State National Trustee.
And right next to him is Chad. Go ahead, Chad.
Chad Petersick, State Chaplain.
Next on the list is Jim David.
Sorry, I'm Jim David. I'm the attorney for the state FOP.
And next to him is Andy Suber.
Hey, good morning. Andy Suber, Lakewood Police Independent Guild.
Nice to have you here, sir. Steve Dills.
Steve Dills, State Secretary.
Brian, you're next on my screen.
Brian Banner, Chairman of the Trustees here in sunny Arizona.
Oh, Banner, you're killing me.
Jeff, you're next.
Jeff and I are State Treasurer.
And Jared.
Jared Couch, Washington State FOP, Sergeant of Arms, Lodge 18 President.
And my name is, and before I turn it over to Michael, my name is James Shrimshire. I'm the West Side Vice President and the Legislative Chair. And I see Chad, you have your hand up. What's up, buddy?
I do. I know this is about the legislative thing. I just want to take a quick moment and recognize FOP member Rob LeMay, who passed away yesterday from COVID. He was a trooper and a FOP member, Washington State. So please put him in your thoughts and his family and your thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
Yep. I think it's totally appropriate to have a couple of seconds of silence for our fallen brother. So if we could do that right now. Okay, Michael, with that, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Chief. Welcome to the 29th Legislative Day in a 60-day session. We are getting really, really close to the midway point. This coming Tuesday at 5 p.m. is Policy Committee cutoff. And as I mentioned before, it's a big cutoff date. It certainly skinnies down the number of bills that are in play or in progress in the legislature from a pure policy perspective. Remember that is always caveated on items that are necessary to implement the budget. So as the budget negotiations get closer, there may be bills that come back up that that didn't get out of the policy committee by the first cutoff, but remain to their liveliness, if you will, if referenced in the budget. So know that. I know Chief Shrimshire has put out a list, and I'm going to go down that list and pause and see if anybody has any questions or if we've got anything going on in the chat, James, that we need to check with. So first couple of bills on the pension side that I want to talk about are House Bill 1701 and Senate Bill 5652. Those are the bills that implement the benefit improvement that we've talked about on previous calls. There were some technical changes that were made to both of those bills at the request of the state actuary. No adverse impact on substance. And those bills passed out of the Appropriations Committee on the House side and the Ways and Means Committee on the Senate side 2 days ago. So that's a good sign. Those bills are now in the rules committee, the respective rules committees, and are eligible to be put on a floor calendar to be debated. If a debate is, necessary, I would say that 1701, I don't think had any no votes, and I don't believe 5652 had any no votes, but I want to double check that just to be safe as I'm standing here. So yeah, there weren't any no votes on it coming out of committee. So again, both bills are in rules. That's a good spot. And we'll probably have to get through a little bit of policy work before next Tuesday, before they start moving off of the floor calendar onto what's called the calendar, where things move out of rules and then are able to be debated on the floor. Also in that world, on the pension side, is House Bills 1804. And remember, that's the military bill that also passed out of committee earlier this week. And then 1669 also passed out on the 25th. So from a pension reform standpoint and a benefit improvement standpoint, I think we're in good shape moving forward, given the, relative quickness with those bills moving out of their fiscal committees in, relatively short order, and what I would call before the fray. Once all the policy committees get done next Tuesday, and this is just process, once the flurry of bills come out of the policy committees by next Tuesday, the Ways and Means and Appropriations Committee staffs kind of go crazy, because then their agendas, if there are fiscal notes and fiscal impacts on any of those policy bills, if the Appropriations and Ways and Means Committee are wanting to hear them, they've got to basically kind of reshuffle their deck and insert those policy bills that have fiscal impacts into their schedules, which is why we'll be having some late night hearings next week in the Appropriations and Ways and Means Committee, and the likelihood of a Saturday meeting on both sides, which is pretty typical in the legislature once you start bumping up to the fiscal committee cutoff, which happens on Monday, the 7th of February. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions on the pension bills. You guys are pretty quiet this morning.
Michael, I had one question from one of our members here locally. Want to know if this passed, what the prospective payout time would be for anybody that had previously retired. I estimated somewhere around middle of the year.
Yeah, I'd say maybe the last half, Chad. I mean, they're going to have to gin up some stuff to make the payment calculations. They're going to have to gin up some stuff to make certain that their website, the Left 2 website, has the ability, and the DRS website has the ability to talk to one another, and people are going to have to be able to go through those calculations. So I'd say the last half of the year is probably better.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And for clarification, we're talking 2023, because one of the technical adjustments was making the start date of this before it would go live January 1, 2023, right? And so if you remember, Steve Nelson testified it's going to take them till the end of the year to get their software up and moving. So they're not going to start issuing any payouts until January at the earliest.
Okay.
So I stand corrected, Chad.
Yeah, that makes two of us.
Okay, right on. If I'm going to be corrected, I just assume be in your world at the same time. So
I'm very used to it. So
me too. Just ask James. Next couple of bills are House Bills 1719 and 1735. Remember, 1719 is the less lethal bill for beanbags, shotguns, and that sort of thing. And then 1735 is the bill that includes involuntary treatment acts, helping other first responders, domestic violence, child custody, orders of the court, and those sorts of things. And again, opens up, if you will, those instances when peace officers can render assistance without, fear of either violating policy or exercising discretion and using force in instances where, some of the legal beagles would say runs a risk under the previous law of a lawsuit. So both of those bills passed off of the House floor last night. On 1719, there wasn't any no votes. And then on 1735, I think there were 5 no votes. And most of those no votes are probably on the Republican side. And I think, right, wrong, good, bad, or indifferent. I think there are some folks in the legislature who would like to go back to, pre the 21 session and kind of, allow us to have the greatest amount of discretion that we had prior to the 2021 session. So that's where I kind of feel like some of those no votes are coming from. Those bills will now go over to the Senate. And once we get through policy and fiscal committee cutoffs, we'll start back into hearings on bills that cross the rotunda. So those bills will be heard in the Senate Law and Justice Committee here over the next few weeks. And they're pretty, those bills have been testified to really positively, have been worked really hard by ourselves and other stakeholders, and not a lot of opposition and testimony. So I feel pretty good that, just got to keep moving through the process and keep working their way through it. So again, feel really good about those moving along. Any questions on those, folks?
Michael, if I can just interject for a minute, and I appreciate the breakdown of this, and for those who are listening and to our members, we've always taken that approach, trying to make good policy. I know that there's going to be some, like Michael mentioned, that want this to be prior to last year, everything back to normal. We're just not in that place. We have to do what we can to provide, allow us to have some of the tools that we can do our jobs. And, so being at the table and working with everybody involved and creating good policy is what we're about. And so we're going to continue to do that regardless.
Great. Thank you, Marco. Anything else on that before I keep scooting along? Okay. Next couple of bills that we have on our list are some ones that we've been spending a lot of time on in the last 48 hours. House Bill 2037 and Senate Bill 5919. 5919 addresses both vehicular pursuits and Terry stops, and House Bill 2037 really just is a Terry stop bill. James and I are in process this weekend of collaborating with the Washington Coalition of Police Accountability, WASPIC, and we're scheduled to meet with some legislators later on today. And we're trying to work through a definition of physical force and trying to find that, that middle ground that everybody can agree to, that, maybe not everybody's happy with, but something that we can all live with. So we meet later today, again, with some folks on the Senate side. We meet later today with some folks from WASPIC and the community groups. And then we'll go from there and see where next week ends up. 5919 is the Senate bill that's sponsored by Rep. Senators Van de Weg, Mullet, and others. Pretty good bipartisan bill in terms of sponsorships. And we're going to see how the public hearing goes next week. I know that both Senator Dingra and Representative Goodman are really trying to find a needle to thread so that it's a piece of legislation that not only law enforcement can live with, but also the community groups can live with as well. Again, working with the chairs and stakeholders on the physical force definition, and we'll keep you all posted and have some more news next Saturday for sure after this policy cutoff goes, and we'll have a better lay of the land once those discussions between us and some other stakeholders continue over the next week or so. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions. We've also had, before I forget, We've also had our inside attorneys, Alan took a look at it. And I know Chief Shrimpshire has shopped some language that we have that we've been working on and shopped that around as well, and are getting pretty positive feedback from attorneys who practice in this area. So with there, I'll stop. And James, I see you came off mute, and see if you can put a finer point on what I just went through.
No, you always do a great job. Thanks, Michael. You always do a great job of putting a finer point. I'm more the blunt point. And so some of the things that we're addressing in this definition and is the concerns that were brought up about compliant cuffing. And when we talk about a definition of physical force in both 2037 and its companion, or not quite companion, but close to, in the Senate 5919, we're talking about force that can be used on a Terry stop. I think there was some confusion. However, that confusion began, but the definition of physical force is the force that can be used to prevent somebody from fleeing on a Terry stop. So the definition that we're working on, I don't want to get into details because it's still fluid, but we are addressing things like compliant cuffing, and we have gained some headway with that. The pushback is now compliant cuffing going to be reportable? The pushback for that is, well, you define what's reportable for us, not CJTC, not the legislature at this point. That's basically still at the discretion of the department. So we're continuing to work as Marco said, and we're keeping to our mantra of being collaborative and working with all stakeholders. For us, this is not a win-loss. This is working together to get a safe place for all our members to work and be able to do their job effectively. That we don't look at this as hey, we're here to dominate and win. We're here to work collaboratively, right? If we're ever going to gain back that trust of, hey, the community trusts us, we know good police work, this is where it starts, working collaboratively, not competitively. And so that's what we're doing. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to stay focused on the FOP message. And I look forward to a positive outcome.
And may I add that I know, Michael's on here. I'm going to probably embarrass him a little bit, but this guy is one of the hardest working lobbyists in Olympia, and he is doing a fantastic job of navigating through all this. And we're glad to have him here in the FOP for sure.
I appreciate that, Marco, very much. And what I would respond to with that is all in a day's work. All right. Okay, I'm going to move on to House Bill 1507, which is a statewide independent prosecutor. I think from our call last week, we had some meeting. We had a meeting with the prime sponsor. She had made a decision to go back to her original bill, which is a bill that places the statewide Office of Independent Investigations into the Attorney General's office, which is something that we are opposed to. Moreover, the original bill keeps the local prosecutors in what I would call the driver's seat in terms of making charges. And my words, it kind of takes the current system and shuffles it up a little bit, but really just kind of leaves the current system in place. And for the Coalition on Police Accountability, not having that conflict of interest, first of all, not having that conflict of interest piece and the presumption in there, is a non-starter for them. And that's something that they really think is important. To have a piece of legislation on independent prosecutor go forward. We would tend to agree with that. And we're really trying to keep, as we've talked about on these calls, the local politics out of charging decisions at the local level. We've had some good conversations with various prosecutors around the state. Some prosecutors really don't want these matters in their wheelhouse and in their shops for a lot of different reasons. There are other prosecutors out there who take the position that it was all things charging. were things that their voters elect them to do. And if they don't do it right, they will get unelected. While we can appreciate that, we're really focused on getting one statewide standard and having that, work hand in hand with the Office of Independent Investigations. And James knows way more about being on that advisory group for the Independent Investigations Office, knows more detail about how important it is to have a statewide prosecutor and a statewide Office of Independent Investigations working together, and how in other jurisdictions where they put forward a province Office of Independent Investigation, and then having the independent prosecutor kind of trickle behind hasn't been helpful. To get truly independence and to really get at a statewide level system, you have to have those two entities working hand in glove together. So we and ourselves and the coalition group respectfully asked that that bill be sat down because of our opposition. I would note that some other folks also testified and are opposed to that bill, including the defense attorneys. And they got a sister organization that goes along with them. And another law enforcement group testified in opposition as well and wants to go kind of back to where we were, which from our perspective, given the majorities and the concerns with law enforcement policing, we just don't think, that we want to go back to the way things were. So and that is scheduled for executive action Thursday of next week. I haven't had a chance to speak to the chair as to whether or not that bill is going to move or not. So I'm going to reserve judgment on how that bill is faring. But again, I think the level of opposition that's out there may put us in a position where we have to come back next session and try to, figure out a statewide independent prosecutor policy. The downside to it not going is it sets up the statewide Office of Independent Investigations now to not work with one office at the state level. Now they've got to work with 39 offices, prosecutors around the state. And I'm going to leave that up to, the advisory group that James is on. And it's going to make it a lot, in my humble opinion, it's going to make it a lot more clunky and a lot more, disconnected when you don't have that statewide Office of Prosecution and Investigations going together. So we'll see how we go next week. And we'll be able to provide you an update next Saturday, given that the policy cutoff is here next Thursday. We'll be able to give you an update on where and what the status is on all these bills for sure. So with that, being a little bit too windy, James, anybody want to add anything on 1507? All right, off we go. Senate Bill 5691. Remember, this is the legislation that requires prosecutors, and the original required both prosecutors and city attorneys to provide an annual report detailing their local strategy for charging various classes of crimes, and specifically noting how many were referred to a particular office by law enforcement and how many were actually charged by the local prosecutors. It's a bill that sponsored by Senator Gildon, Honeyford, and Rivers, and it's something that we are totally behind and think it's good policy. I would note that bill did pass out of committee this week, but it did get a couple of amendments to it. And it inserted a funding out clause, which means it makes it subject to funding in the budget. So, these locals always have, this don't give us any unfunded mandates. So we'll see how that goes in terms of the fiscal note. There was an amendment that was adopted that did limit it to county prosecutors only. So city prosecutors got left out. I shouldn't probably say it that way. Got amended out, so it's only to the 39 counties. And it also amended the bill to allow for reporting requirements for juvenile felonies and misdemeanors as well. It wasn't clear as to whether or not those were included. So there was an amendment put in to specifically call that out. And then Senator Patton also had an amendment added that requires prosecutors to track the number and type of adult felony and misdemeanor cases where the prosecutor has petitioned the court or a court for resentencing pursuant to a particular RCW. So, put some good clarifications in there. We're going to keep pushing the legislation. It's going to have to go to Ways and Means because of the fiscal impact. And my hope is that the legislature finds it in their fiscal hearts to put some funding forward on this so that local prosecutors can't scream unfunded mandate. So with that, I'll pause there and see if there are any questions or adds on 5691.
Just one briefly, Michael, I appreciate the breakdown on that. I think, what we've seen throughout this country where, we have, people who have committed some very, dangerous crimes, been let out of jail in one way or another, and then in turn, commit even, worse crimes, is always been a concern throughout our nation. I think bills like this, to where, it allows for a process to be more transparent from the prosecution side of it, whether they decide to charge, not charge, or whatever the case may be, is important, because I think our citizens need to know, especially our victims need to know what's going on. And so I think this is a perfect opportunity for us to jump on board with support of this.
Great. Thank you, Marco. Anything else anybody want to add?
I just, I just want to point out that we don't care what side of the aisle you're on. If you got good policy, we're going to back it. And this is an example. We back just an equal number from both sides of the aisle. It's all about the policy for us and not about the politics.
Fair enough. All right, next bill on our list is House Bill 1845. And that's a bill that's sponsored by Representative Gina Mossbrucker. And I would note, very bipartisan support, Representative Orwell, who's on the D side of the aisle up in the Burien area, Representative Jacobson, who's a Republican in the Puyallup area, and then Representatives Rule and Shoemake, who are up north. So remember, this is the bill that requires WASPIC to develop and implement a body cam grant program. And the grants can be used for an initial purchase, maintenance, and replacement of body cameras. The funding can also be used for the maintenance and data storage costs associated with the public records requests and the hiring of staff to operate or oversee internally a body-worn camera program. Any agency that's awarded the grant must comply, with the statutes to go along with the Public Records Act. And for those of you who don't know, on body-worn cameras, there's a whole laundry list of things that cannot be divulged and that need to be redacted. So it must comply with all the data collection reporting requirements that are established by WASPIC. And then WASPIC's required to submit an annual report at the end of each year to the legislature on how the program and what the program funded. Good piece of legislation. It is subject to appropriation. So that policy bill, as I mentioned earlier, is a bill that gets to go to the Appropriations Committee. And we'll continue to advocate for the legislature to, I'll just say it, stick as much money into that program as they can. We're totally supportive of body cameras and really think that anything that the legislature can do to help folks get into that area is a good policy. And we hope that they follow it up with funding as well. So with that, James, I will stop and see if there are any adds or additions on body cams. All right. Next item for me is officer wellness budget items. James and I have met with Representative Levitt on the House side and she's working with previous Representative Lovick, who is now Senator Lovick. You may recall we talked about that a while back. Representative Levitt and Senator Lovick are working together to get some officer wellness dollars in the budget, like has happened in previous years. Right now, I think WASPIC put out about $405,000 in officer wellness grants. This is a big ask. So the asset they're starting out with is $2.5 million in officer wellness appropriations. 1.5 of that to be used solely to distribute grants to law enforcement agencies for establishing officer wellness programs. May be used, but not limited to things like injury prevention, peer support programs, stress management, physical fitness, and other physical and behavioral health services. So that's 1.5 million of the 2.5 million. And then they've dedicated another $1 million to establish and coordinate an online and mobile-based app for any Washington law enforcement officer, 911 call taker, or dispatch, and any of their current employees and their families to anonymously access an on-demand wellness app. And I know that James has this in his community, and I don't know if other agencies are using a similar app, but they've divvied this up between wellness programs and departments, and then standing up this app at WASPIC. So we're going to advocate for this budget proviso, and with any luck, it gets funded and just the way it is in the language that we've seen so far. So it's been great to work with Representative Levitt. We were on a call earlier this week with some folks from WASPIC and some folks from WACOPS and some policy folks in the House D side. And I think we're in good shape. There seems to be some really good bipartisan support for this. So the question is are we just able to get it in and get it funded? So we're going to work really hard between now and the end of session to make certain that happens. So miss anything, James? You want to tack in
Nope.
anything there?
I think you hammered it really well, and it just shows again how collaborative the FOP is. We're working with all the law enforcement groups on this that were invited to the meeting. We are glad that there was unanimous, overwhelming support, and no, I'm going to use the term nitpicking, probably not the right term, but either way, it's everybody was in agreement 100%. This is the right thing to do. We appreciate, we had a lot of discussion about the app. Cortico seems to be the one that's bubbling to the top, and to have the ability to provide that to every law enforcement officer, every peace officer in the state of Washington, and mostly for our, including our members, that's a great thing. And so I personally, in my department, we use the Cortico app, and my officers find it to be very beneficial and anonymous way to seek out those resources that takes the chain of command out of it and provides them that support that they need. So I'm an advocate for it, but other than that, it's a great bill, or a great piece of legislation. We're going to be advocating for this budget proviso as the process goes through.
All right, and then before we get to Q&A, I'm just going to go through a couple of other little things, James, really quickly. Qualified immunity, House Bill 1202 still has not been scheduled for executive action in the House Civil Rights and Judiciary Committee. So we'll see where that ends up next week as we go through this cutoff week in the policy committees. So we'll stop there on that. I would also note that Senator Wynn has put forth a piece of legislation, Senate Bill 5485. And this is a piece of legislation that probably something we just can't get there on, but this is a legislation that says you can't have you can't stop somebody as a primary offense on taillights, expired tags, and a whole laundry list of, kind of what I would call minor traffic stuff. It's inhibitive of our ability to do proactive policing. It does allow those things to be secondarily charged after somebody's pulled over for something else. it's something that there's like, I think 2 or 3 Ds who signed on to it. It's something that I think, we can sign up in opposition to, but it's also something that I really just don't want to, at this point in time, expend a lot of political capital on, as we're focused on so many other things. But if folks ask us, we'll say we're opposed, and get on the record, our opposition. But other than that, I don't think we have enough time and effort, to spend on that bill, other than just showing our opposition and see where the bill goes.
Yeah, we are a solid no on this, and this is where our members can help us out with the legislative process, and that is call your representatives, and we will post the legislative districts and the contact information for all those, and this is where your family members, everybody can get involved. However, Michael is absolutely correct. We have a lot of things that we have to get off the finish line this last week. And I want to make it very clear, this is something coming from the streets of Seattle. And if you pay attention to the Seattle Times, Seattle PD recently went to this. And it is not something that, and if I'm wrong, anybody on this call, by all means, speak up. Any member, please give me a call. But we are 100% opposed to this. And this is going to take you, everyone out there, to contact your representative, have your family members contact the representatives and senators and say, this is not what the rest of Washington wants. So this is one of those we're getting legislated from the streets of Seattle, and we need to draw that line at the Seattle city limits and say the rest of Washington is not safer with this piece of legislation. Okay.
All right. So that is all I have for today. And as the saying goes, happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody got any questions? I'm not seeing anything on Facebook. If there's no questions, any further discussion, Marco, why don't you take us out, and we'll go around the room for closing thoughts.
Thank you, James. Michael, as always, I think James mentioned it earlier that we're about helping with the collaborative process of creating good policy. We're showing that through the bills that we support and oppose, on both sides of the aisle, and it just shows that we are there to do what's best for our profession, and taking politics out of it. And so, again, appreciate everybody's commitment, on coming here to this Zoom. Those who attend our Tuesday roundtable as well, to talk about what's happening for that week and our strategy. And I think it's a good time just to be, part of the FOP. We're showing that we, support the, profession as a whole, and quite frankly, we're the only organization that can represent every facet of law enforcement. So we will be there for brothers and sisters, and always. And if you have any questions, just reach out to one of us. Thank you.
All right, Jack, you're next on. I'm just going on my screen. Who's what? So, Jack, you got any closing thoughts?
Nope, I'm good. I appreciate all the work. Michael needs to quit trying to put us in for overtime, and let's get this thing done. It's all about the pay, right?
Well, I always say, when the legislature is in session, nobody's safe.
That's right. Yeah, great job, Michael. I appreciate it, and Shrimp helping you.
Thanks, Jack.
So Andy Suver in the chat puts, thanks for all the hard work. Andy, do you want to say something as well?
No, that pretty much sums it up. Thank you all.
Hey, we appreciate you and Charles attending these meetings. It's very important. We get feedback from our larger labor groups, and I'll help you out, Michael. Charles was going to give a brief on an update today on the data collection process. However, he got called away to a special assignment. So we'll just put him on at the top of the agenda for next week. And I look forward to hearing his report about how the AG's office data collection. And remember, we hold the only law enforcement seat for rank and file on that on that advisory board. That's setting the parameters for data collection. So it's a kudos. Charles is doing a phenomenal job, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say. Dills, you're up. Okay. Dills.
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, Jeff. Go ahead.
That's a tough act to follow. No, I'm all good. Thank you, guys.
And Holt.
Good to go, thanks.
All right. So I'll close this out real quick. And Jack and Marco, if you didn't see in the chat, Jim David would like you guys to stick around. I'll keep the meeting open. Let me turn the recording off before you guys start chatting. So I want to thank everybody here. As Michael has talked about, and as I talked about, we're right in the thick of things. You know, it's a 24/7 job right now. And I want to echo what Marco said about Michael. He puts his keeps me straight, keeps me from losing my cool sometimes, but he's always there and he's always doing a great job for us. This will be up on the YouTube channel a little bit later today, WAFOP TV. We're getting a lot of likes, a lot of views on our YouTube channel, and it is getting shared. So much appreciated. And Chad, I am so sorry I forgot you. So when I get done here, Friar Chad is going to close this out. But again, thank you very much for everybody attending. And with that, Chad, take us away.
No, I just couldn't pass up a chance to give you a hard time, James. Thanks. I got nothing.
As you should, as you should. But again, I appreciate everybody. If you look at all the people on this call, the majority of them are state board members. That's how much we care about this organization. We care about our members and we care about the fight. And so we're going to keep fighting for you. I'll see you guys all next week, and take her easy.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening.